Welcome to the 100 Days Unleashing My Superpowers campaign. Today I have an inspirational global STEM leader born in South Africa and based in New York. Nerissa Naidu. She's a chemical engineer by profession. She's the co-founder of Exil and has actually been named one of the top 3 female fintechs globally by Deutsche Bank, Google Cloud, and Atos. She also serves on the boards of Portably and Fair Hire. She's a former global head of strategy at the insurance group of AIG. She's been a keynote speaker on diversity and inclusion. In fact, she's very passionate about it, and she's actually chaired discussion on systemic inequality and racial injustice. Nerissa was selected as a young global leader in the World Economic Forum in 2019. She was also featured in the Financial Times as a leader who is to watch. We just recently completed a survey on what it takes to achieve in a male-dominated work environment. And you won't believe that more than 95% of women in STEM professions who actually participated in this survey agreed with the statement that says, when women support each other, more women will be successful in male-dominated work environments. More than 60% of women also said the biggest challenge in getting more women promoted to C-suite is not having enough women in those positions. That is why PhD, which is pull head down, is detrimental to our agenda of closing the gender gap. We need to call each other out on women who don't support other women. I am where I am, not because I've been good enough or working too hard. I have been working too hard, but it is not only because of male champions of change, but largely because I've been supported by phenomenal women whom I've worked with over the years. Some of them I've actually interviewed them here. Hence why we need more women leaders. Please get inspired by watching this video of Nerissa sharing how she attributes most of her successes to not only male champions and sponsors, but to a female mentor and a coach. Thank you. What do you think were those barriers that to your career advancement as a woman in STEM?
So I think there's a few, but the most prominent for me is recognizing that women deserve a seat at the table. So whether it comes from my first day of working in a steel plant to even my first board seat, a lot of the times men unfortunately assume that women are not there, or even if they're sitting physically at the table, their voices are not heard. And so one of the barriers I feel is that there's a psychology that women are not actually sitting at the table, or they don't deserve that seat.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's one of the biggest barriers, but a fundamental one. And the more you get to know me, the more I kind of elbow people out of the way to get to the seat. I'm very determined to get there is the point, but you kind of have to fight to be just sitting at the table, and I feel that that's a huge barrier, because I've met exceptional women peers in my career who maybe didn't not fight as hard as me, or weren't dealt the same opportunities or allyship, which you and I will talk about later, so they couldn't get there, whereas it should be a natural progression if you're showing all the means. So I think one of the biggest barriers is just getting the seat, and I've fought hard for that, not just in my engineering career, but also later on in my career in financial services and now on boards, that women are not recognized. And I think when we first spoke, I gave you the example of from the time Marie Curie, the first Nobel Prize winner, woman Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, to a few years ago when Esther Duflo won it for economics, they were always attached to their husbands in the recognition, and so I think the the psychology of women are there because they're brilliant and they're able and they're capable is something that I have faced through my career, but I also think that women institutionally face as they progress. And I think the second piece also is we conform. So early on in my career, I got feedback like, you're too forthright, you need to act a certain way, men don't do this, you complain, whether those are mine, but I'm sure a lot of women empathize or see a lot of that type of feedback in their careers. And what I realized is you have to be self-aware and you need to understand what's important and what works for you. Because I can give you the recipe for my success, and even if someone copied it in a model office fashion, you're not gonna receive the same results. Just do what, be self-aware, be confident, but use what works for you. I use that mantra now a lot more than obviously early in my career, because earlier in my career I was trying too hard to be like everyone else, until I realized a lot of the times, like, I'm not a white guy, I can't do what he does, I'm gonna have to be me and see how it goes. And I'd say the last thing that I found as a barrier, which I've worked through, is being very deliberate and asking for what you want.
Yeah.
And a lot of women, we do this in a indirect way. We do it in a, very pleasant way. I'd like you to consider me. I think I want to do this. Whereas a lot of men I've met in my career, especially in financial services, they'll be saying, I'm going to make managing director in 2 years. I'm going to, it's like a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen. And so it's a subtlety, but I feel like we are less demanding. And so as the years have progressed, I have been very forthright about why I'm doing certain things and the expectation that I have to do that. And so I think those three are probably some of the highlights that I've overcome, but I know that's very prevalent in a lot of women's careers.
I want you to tell us, in your career progression, the role of sponsors, the role of mentors, the role of coaches, those three. Maybe you can take us through your career progression, which is kind of like a highlight, and I'll call them the epiphany moments. And yeah.
I made my transition from engineering to consulting and what would be the start of my financial services career slightly accidentally. So I wouldn't talk about that being an epiphany. I think that was just luck, where I got called for an interview by accident. A recruiter had mixed up my sister's and my CV and called me for the interview. Exactly. So out of engineering into, financial services was a little bit of the universe. But when I entered consulting with Accenture, I would say that was, the start of really me getting sponsors and building, I want to say, worldview on my career. One of the first ones was my career counselor. We have career counselors in consulting, and mine was the head of banking, a woman named Wendy. And I think she was the first person, this was an epiphany for me, where growing up in a small town in South Africa, again, under apartheid, I don't think we were taught to think big, magnanimously. We thought about security, we thought about getting a good job, and we thought about our lives in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I think she was one of the people who really thought, like, gave me the thought process to think broader than South Africa, to really, cement myself in terms of think internationally, think about your purpose broader than even the company. Yeah. And she was probably like the highlights in terms of how that changed my psychology. So if I think of, mentors and how that changed my psychology, it was the first time being in an international organization like Accenture that I said, oh, well, maybe I'm going to spend a few years in South Africa and try and get the opportunity to leave or work on an international assignment, or think about it other than my life in South Africa and that security that I wanted growing up. Yeah. So Wendy for me was the person that really changed my psychology about it. She was also one of the first female leaders that I saw that was extremely driven, forthright, and fought for what she wants. So in a way, you could almost say that, I emulated a little bit of what she did. because I was very attracted to not just the demeanor, but the strong character that she had. And she was one of the few female leaders in the organization at the time. So I'd say she was definitely pivotal. And because of her, she also helped me orchestrate my move to London, which was the start of my international career. And when you leave, as you have also, you realize that the world is small in many ways and super connected, but the level of opportunity is magnanimous. And so I would say that, that was one of the pivotal moments. The other thing I want to talk about, and it's not a single example, but it's about, male allies. Yeah. And I would say that obviously, firstly, in the environments that I've worked in and being in financial services, you can't step away from the fact that most of your bosses are probably going to be male. Yeah. And I was very lucky that, lucky in terms of the bosses that I had, predominantly were very open, forthright about female engagement and great stewards for championing women promotions. So, I had one or two in particular, both in the European Union and even when I moved to the States with Accenture, that championed that. I had one partner who was French who was in the European Union when I worked in London, but also he was in the US when I moved to New York. And he helped orchestrate, my transfers, some of my promotions, some of the opportunities that I had. But again, along the way, I had people, sponsors, male allies who were recognizing me for me, not because I was the woman or but they also recognized that there was a deficit in equality. And so they were pushing my sponsorship heavily too. And I like that, because it's easy to say, I want to be a part of it, so I'm going to be part of the boys club. And to actually step away and say, no, I'm going to speak to, or sponsor this person who looks different, is different, behaves differently, but still provides all the merit and credibility for the promotion. I can't fault that either. So I'd say that there have been male allies along the way in my career that has helped. And then the last piece I would say that was a turning point for me, and this has monumentally accelerated my career, was when I left consulting. I went, into corporate America. I worked for AIG. The bosses that I had there, also, as I mentioned, I'm very forthright by now in my demands and my promotions and my ambitions. But I worked for bosses consistently who championed me and who recognized that when I wanted to get promoted or when I had proven myself, that they should be positioning me for the next opportunity. And so I'd say that, that for me was also a big career boost.
Let's talk about culture. There is a book that was written by one lady, a fantastic book. I think she really did very well, which says, it's called The Fix, the invisible barriers for women advancement in workplaces. And what she says is that workplaces are not designed for women. And that's why women don't progress to C-suite positions. What are your comments on the culture of an organization?
I think as you get further on, I think in your 20s, you tend to focus away from that, because in your mind, you're doing the grunt work, you're doing the time to potentially get elevated. And so, me personally also, I in retrospect, I think I worked in a very open culture in Accenture, and consulting is quite a flat organization. Not to say that means there's no politics, but I'm saying that the levels in the organization make it easy to navigate. But I think, culture is such an important thing. And to your point, there are a lot of invisible barriers culturally as you get further in your career. I feel like, women, especially in STEM, you almost need to find mechanisms or connectivity to help cope with some of that, because I don't think that there's the silver bullet that's going to solve it in the industry. Whether we're talking Silicon Valley, financial services, engineering, whatever it is, there's currently, I should say, and it's changing, but there is currently a barrier. I think culturally, people celebrating, Kamala Harris, Jane Fraser, the first CEO of a big bank, Indra Nooy, that raises awareness and a bit of a cultural change in the fact that there are examples now. We don't have those examples. What's wrong with us? I've heard some male leaders say that. But I have also been on the receiving end of really toxic cultures where they assume you are the person taking notes, or they assume that this is all that you're ever going to do. Or I've had someone say, this is fine for you until you have children, and I no longer operate, or I step away from cultures that are toxic in that way. Culture is so important because I feel like when you look at things like the Me Too movement and toxicity in a workplace, there are pivotal moments where you have, the chance to recalibrate that and say, that's not acceptable. We don't stand for that. Or like Black Lives Matter. Or you toe the line and it keeps sowing that deadly seed, over and over again.
Yeah.
And so I feel like even this year, there's pivotal moments in culture, and millennials do this a lot. They choose companies for the culture and the values of those companies rather than just what I did in my 20s, right? For me, it was like the opportunity to add. So I feel like culture is an important step, but it's an evolving one. And companies need to evolve for its workforces. And I'm hoping with not just women, but LGBTQ, minorities in certain countries, etc., that culture evolves across companies. But like I said, for me personally, I always prefer to create a culture of openness, and also to teach me, right? I'm unconsciously biased. Everyone in the world is. And I always try to create the culture of openness to understand how I can learn too. And I think that's what companies need to do also.
What should women be doing that they're not currently doing to succeed? Maybe you've touched quite a really great points, but maybe you may have one or two. What should women be doing that they're currently not doing to succeed, especially STEM-related professions?
I think they should be bold. They should take risks. Sometimes we get into certain positions, or we do things, and firstly, we suffer from imposter syndrome. We feel like we shouldn't be there. And then the second thing is we say, well, if we upset the apple cart, we might not get the same opportunities. And I'd say that, you should always think that you deserve that seat at the table anyway, but be bold and think about that and participate. The second thing I would say is, be direct. And I touched on this before, but a lot of the times, and I've seen women even that I was coaching or worked for me do this, where they want the promotion, they're very capable, but they say it in such an indirect way, or they're not forthcoming about it, that it's like solving a mystery. You're not quite sure what they do, or whether they want that. And I feel like women should be more direct about that. And to your point, balanced with the whole aggressive, unconscious biases that could occur, but they should at least be centered about the fact that they want the promotion, or they want the opportunity, or they want the change in role, and then negotiate when it's going to happen, or how it's going to happen, or etc. But sometimes they don't even say that they want it. And I'd say be explicit, because especially in big organizations, everyone is busy, and sometimes you might get overlooked because they perceive you not wanting it. And again, it's a bias, but you just have to tell them.
I would like to know, maybe if you can summarize 3 leadership strategies to succeed in a male-dominated work environment. What would you say those are?
I think I mentioned them already, but I would say, be bold, take risks, and don't apologize for being a woman.
Thank you. This was Nerissa Naidu, an amazing, 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 phenomenal woman. I'm so excited, and thank you so much, Nerissa.
No, I enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to reading your book.